What experiences have you had with grief and loss? Do you know how to grieve? And how do you explain loss to a child? On this episode of The News and You, a story a little closer to home. In 2023, I lost my best friend in a tragic hit and run. I found myself asking questions about grief, loss, and where our loved ones go when they're no longer with us. My way of processing this loss was to write a children's book. Today I'm joined by Eleanor Scherson, the artist behind the book's beautiful imagery. We'll talk about how she brought the story to life, the creative process behind the illustrations, and the deeper meaning woven through every page. This is the story behind my children's book, Where is Pillar? I'm Elisha Foon, journalist, storyteller, and I believe everyone you walk past has a story, and that story could change your life. So let's crack it open to discover The News and You. Grief can be incredibly isolating. It can make you feel like you're the only one carrying something this heavy. But the truth is you're not. And that's really why this conversation exists, to bring it into the light. Before we begin, I want to share my own story, because this conversation didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of loss, out of confusion, and out of the kind of pain that doesn't ask for permission before it enters your life. Just over 2 years ago, I experienced the greatest tragedy of my life, the death of my best friend. I remember the phone call, the trembling voice of her sister on the other end, trying to explain something that shouldn't need explaining. The details came in fragments, a hit and run, the suddenness of it all, and then silence. Like something inside you shatters. My childhood best friend was gone, and the months that followed, they felt like a living hell. Grief is a strange thing. For me, it felt like time slowed down, almost to a halt. But the world didn't. It kept going, and I was at a standstill, trying to process and understand how everything had changed in a single moment. It was like being swallowed by a storm. The emotions didn't come neatly. They came in waves. At first, it was a tidal wave. Denial, sadness, shock, horror and anger, each one crashing into the next before I had time to catch my breath. And then, a kind of numbness, like my body was trying to protect me from feeling too much too quickly. But grief doesn't disappear, it changes shape. And in the middle of it all, there were questions. Her nephews asked, where did she go? Where is she? And slowly something began to take shape. What started as fragments of emotion became a story. A gentle one, a story that could hold the weight of loss, but in a way that a child could also understand it. A story that didn't try to explain everything, but created space for questions, for feelings, for love that doesn't disappear. That story became Where is Pillar? Where is Pillar came out of that place, not just as an answer, but a way to sit with the questions and to make space for them. It's now something I'm sharing with the world in the hope that no one feels alone in their grief, especially families with young children. This conversation today is really just an extension of that, an honest look at grief, how we move through it and how we process it with one another. Grief is something all of us will face in our life, but it's not something we talk about often. And there are so few resources to help guide us through what can be one of life's most turbulent storms. So with that in mind, let's begin with the story behind the story. Here's my conversation with Eleanor Scherson, the illustrator of my children's book. First of all, this is a story called Where is Pillar about Pillar the caterpillar and Miller the mouse. They are best friends and they go on adventures and they live in an oak tree together. And the inspiration behind, I guess, the characters in the book, we very much pulled from like Winnie the Pooh or Beatrice Potter with the little, Jemima Paddle Duck or the little rabbits that live in a cozy house together. Talk to me about how you were able to bring these characters to life.
So it looks at times like it has been done with traditional painting materials. And so for me, in terms of a design perspective for this book, I really wanted to focus on a really constrained palette that gave a real tone of the book. I really wanted to focus on using as minimal amount of digital brushes as possible. And I still wanted to give that handcraft feel, but from a digital painting point of view. The other things that were really important to me in the creation of this book as well was thinking stylistically how I wanted to show the characters. And like we talked a lot about Beatrix Potter and she is just so darling. In fact, she doesn't live that far. Like her house is not that far from where I live in England, which is really cool. For a while, I actually would design like accessories and things where I was doing custom illustration for a while. And that style that I developed over that time, I really wanted to mature into the creation of this book. And so the style that you see here is kind of like a continuation of something I had been doing when I was teaching full time and designing custom jewelry on the side. And so I wanted the drawings to feel really approachable. And I wanted the illustrations to really convey deep emotion without the need for extreme detail. Because I think if I'm doing a book for a child, I actually want it to speak to a child's drawing, and I wanted it to speak directly to them, because ultimately this book is not just for me and it's not just for you and it's not just for parents who don't know how to have this conversation or the teaching community. It is actually for the kids themselves, and I want kids to connect with the fun of it. And I was actually illustrating this book for a bit while I was teaching for a bit. And that was really fun to be able to like give kids, like talk to the kids about the sneak peeks and like what it takes. Cause they'd ask, like, they could be full of so many questions, which was really cool.
Colour was also a really important aspect of the book.
Actually designing what grief looks like is surprisingly a really hard emotion to try and describe to people. And I think when we were talking about earlier about how with your grief journey, how it's really hard to explain to people what grieving someone actually is feeling like for you. I think the same sentiment goes in how to draw it. And so this is what came out. But I know for my own, I was inspired a lot by my own experience of grief, and that there are so many different emotions and through the colors represented here. So we've got like orange and green and blue and red and some other colors. I wanted to kind of use those as indicators of different emotions that the character was feeling. And so it's like something you can ascribe your own meaning to different colors. I mean, obviously for some people, like sadness is blue or like green is vitality or whatever. But I also think that kids, and specifically tamariki in school, can bring their own cultural context as to what those colours could mean as well.
Your idea was to bring in like a black ribbon. Sometimes grief felt like a storm. It kind of just felt like you were being crushed or tightened by this feeling, personified through this black ribbon that swirls around Miller. Essentially, the story goes that Pillar the caterpillar is lost in the storm and doesn't come back, but Mona the monarch butterfly knocks on her door and Miller has to decide, am I going to let someone in? Am I going to have someone beside me to help process the grief, to grieve with, so that I'm not alone? And Mona is essentially the guide to grief. And some people could see that as like an angel or parental figure or a friend. And what we see is the colours go from light when the friends are both on adventures to dark in the midst of the grief, and then slowly but surely we see a transition. That storm that was outside, we start to see it come inside. The black ribbon is such a cool idea, and I think kids will grasp that immediately. So tell me, how did you come up with that?
So there's a few interesting elements of this book that made it really challenging for me, and I'd say the ribbon itself, for me, it was more that when I was experiencing grief and working through my emotions of like walking with someone with illness, it was like it did feel like a tightening, like a physical tightening is what I felt. And so I think we might have showed you some iterations. We kind of played around with some other ideas as well. Like maybe it's more of a structured shape. Maybe it's more of just a solid line. Like, does it have to be something recognizable? And so I kind of landed on the idea of a ribbon because I thought the ribbon can actually then change size. And size and scale in this book is a really big element, because I think one misconception about grief that we talked about quite a lot when you were walking through it really intensely was the fact that grief doesn't just go away. And a lot of books that look at grief and a lot of conversations around grief constantly talk about the cycle. And it doesn't mean that you don't feel those emotions. But I think it was really important for both of us that it didn't disappear and that those emotions are still with you. And there'll be times where you actually go through that process several times and it's something that you carry with you. There's that really great analogy that I have heard about grief around like the jar and how there's a whole bunch of stones in a jar and they're all different things in your life. And when you're going through a really intense grief experience, your stone is quite large and takes up a lot of the jar. But over time, that stone, as it rubs against other things and other people and support in your life, it gets smaller, but it doesn't actually disappear. It's something you always carry around with you. And so with the ribbon idea, it's the fact that the grief ribbon doesn't actually disappear. It just gets smaller. And so it changes and expands with the kind of events that might bring stuff up for you, or the conversations that might happen, or like, for a lot of people, it's life events where grief can really come out again in a slightly different way. It's just trying to show it in a way that feels authentic and realistic to the experience of so many people around me as well who've gone through these experiences.
Very well put. One of the key pointers or advice that I was given by my clinical psychologist that I was working with when I was on my grief journey was that she said, it's important to learn to live alongside grief. Again, grief does not go away. Some people assume there's a really well-known saying, the 5 stages of grief, or, like you feel these emotions, but I actually don't think it's linear. I think some days you feel everything all at once. Anger, some days it's sadness and disappointment, and then sometimes you will feel joy. And you start to feel guilty for that joy or shame for feeling happy in the middle of those moments where you're like, wow, I should not be feeling this. So learning to live alongside grief and knowing, okay, my life is altered forever and I can still put one foot in front of the other, or I can stay and be and process this. I think there's no one size fits all, but I think providing a conversation guide at the back of this book too, that was peer reviewed by a clinical psychologist, will give people permission to have those conversations to create a safe space and journey alongside these characters, perhaps on their own grief journey. With my personal situation, it was a bereavement, it was a death. And for your experience with grief doesn't necessarily mean someone has died.
So I actually had a look at the definition of grief, like in the Oxford Dictionary, and it's actually just an extreme sense of loss. So it's not tied technically to anything to do with bereavement. I've actually had a few conversations, interestingly, with students about grief that have been to do with personal pastoral situations that they were dealing with. And I think the big thing that I would give as advice to parents, obviously I'm not a psychologist, so I'll just put it out there, but actually not trying to fix the situation, I think, is a really important thing. When I did my master's degree of teaching, I actually had a few conversations with other teachers who were talking about some of this stuff. And I think the big thing that I came away with as well, having had my own experience and also talking to other people, was that often the inclination for people who haven't walked through this kind of stuff is to try and fix it. And the fact is that if someone's coming to you about an abuse situation, if someone's coming to you about a foster care situation that's really complex, if someone's coming to you about a relationship breakdown that's happened in the immediate whānau, like, this is not stuff that's okay. And I actually think we're doing a disservice to children to tell them it's okay. It might get better, but you don't actually have to be okay with the situation. And it's like the whole okay to be was really important for me. And we talked about that a lot together, in that it's okay to be in those emotions. It's okay to feel those emotions. It is okay for you not to feel like there's resolution, even though that feels very counterintuitive to how you're feeling at the time. The other thing as well is not forcing a conversation. If a student wants to talk to you and feels safe enough to talk to you, or a child feels safe enough to talk to you about it, like that's a privilege. And that privilege is really important that you respect. And forcing a child to talk about something they don't want to talk about is not really going to help the situation. And it seems like common sense, but when you're also blindsided by the conversation, that can be an inclination that can happen as well. And the other thing, I think in the conversation guide, which I'm really proud of that you and I really worked hard on, and with the psychologist as well, was actually trying to frame the conversation in a really helpful way. And I think it's not an easy conversation. And I don't think anyone is saying that it's okay for us to sit down and have something really deep. Like it might go deeper than you want it to go. And let's be honest, it's a little uncomfortable for some people. But I think the important thing is making it a safe space. I think also another thing I've actually said to students who've disclosed things, I've just been really honest and said, if this is going to impact your safety, and I think this is really important when talking to children, if it's going to impact your safety, I actually cannot stay silent about this, and making that really clear. So those are some suggestions I got from uni, but also suggestions just from my own experience and just conversations I had with students as well. And so hopefully that gives people something helpful. And I think it's important for parents as well that if you're going through this stuff too, like this is a really hard conversation to have. And I have so much compassion for you and whatever you might be walking through, both as a teacher or as a student or as a parent trying to have this conversation, because it's not easy. Yeah. What about you? Have you found that with grief conversations with people, what things have you learned from this experience that you would take into actually go walking alongside someone else that was going through this?
Wow. Well, I think the first thing that surprised me a lot about sharing my story and then sharing the book with people is that I think we've also created a resource that is going to help adults. And so I think adults are going to have an opportunity to be able to process the grief and channel that too. And I think often we don't give ourselves permission. I think there have been at least a dozen men that I have shown this book to, whether they were family, friends, acquaintances, people within the industry, and just to see them sobbing. They weren't expecting to cry. They weren't expecting to feel so deeply moved, but that's exactly what happened. Seeing men particularly crack open through this story has been really humbling and a really beautiful experience, and also very empowering for them as well, because I didn't really say much about what they should and shouldn't do. All I did was share my story and then just leave space for them to feel. And to come alongside me, whether they were comfortable sharing or not. And a lot of them did. A lot of them said, well, thank you so much for doing this. And wow, I think they were quite surprised by their own reaction too. So that to me has really stood out, I think.
The fact that this actually models to people how you can emotionally come through a journey like this. And so it's really important to note that it is not a process that's done necessarily in isolation. There is an emotional storm and there's a physical storm, and there's actually colouring difference that's quite subtly throughout the book, which is intentional to signify whether the characters are going through a metaphorical emotional storm or whether they're going through a physical storm. And it's kind of differentiated by the colours blue and grey. And so I think it's really interesting to look at this as well from a perspective of if you have never had this experience before, if this is completely new to you, if you're dealing with an experience that's really just taking over at the moment, explain that to a child is a really hard thing to do, but it's also hard for yourself. But here is an actual helpful roadmap of how you could actually, in a healthy and emotionally healthy way, bring people alongside you. And I think one thing for myself and my own experiences with loss and grief is actually having people who are willing to sit with you in the mess, sit with you in that situation. There's that incredible Hebrew word I came across ages ago called nudding, which is when nudding just means to just sit in companionable silence with someone.
Oh, I love that.
And
nudding.
I love this word. It's such a beautiful word, but it's something that really resonates with me in that often you can actually do more damage by talking than saying nothing. And I think it takes us It actually takes us to come into the mess and to sit with the person in the mess a lot of the time, to allow them to work through it in order for them to actually heal, because you've got to acknowledge the feelings that you're feeling. And so when we see Miller in this emotional storm, we also see the appearance of Mona. Mona is actually coming physically into the space. And then as the pages progress, you start to see Mona really coming alongside Miller in this situation. The characters don't just come together straight away. It's like a slow and gradual coming together. And even when the disentangling starts to happen, so when the emotions are starting to be more felt, they don't leave each other. And I think often, there's the immediate grief scenario that you're dealing with, but then there's also an aftermath that extends for quite a long time. And often we just need people to come alongside and actually stay for the long haul.
Yeah.
In that situation and be willing to just be there, no matter what the situation is.
Oh, there's so much power and healing in just being with someone. And I think as someone that was in the middle of my grief journey, having people try to fix it or make me feel better or be over the top, that was really frustrating and difficult. I didn't have the capacity to tell people what I needed or wanted. I actually didn't know what I needed or wanted. And so I found it extremely, no disrespect, but I personally found it, and I think a lot of people go through grief, talk about this. If someone is facing a really difficult time or there's been an immediate loss, don't ask them, is there anything I can do? What can I do?
Yeah.
Just do it. Just be of service and be helpful. Make the meal, make the casserole, make the dessert, go around and fold some clothes, do some dishes, leave a note in the letter box, deliver flowers. Nothing is too much when it is in the right heart and spirit. And I think whether you are nervous about being in that space, it's actually better to be a safe person, to actually just to go around and to be, and to make sure that person isn't alone. If you don't know someone very well and they're going through a grief journey, just be thoughtful. You don't have to do the most. I'm sure their friends and family will be there for them, but be thoughtful. Like, for example, you used your skills and your talent and you created this beautiful little graphic.
Oh yeah,
for me. Yeah, it was so touching. Essentially, the message behind it was keep the light on, stay hopeful. It made me feel really loved, and I actually saved it as my screensaver because I couldn't carry hope myself at a time that felt completely hopeless. What does it look like to carry hope for the people around you that are going through a really difficult time, that are going through grief and loss? Carry the hope for them. That looks like being thoughtful, by stepping up, by just doing the thing. Don't ask them, what can I do? Just do it. And that goes such a long way. And it's in those moments, as someone that is on the other side of grief and you're supporting someone, the responses from the person going through grief are usually heightened and more extreme. There could be a lot of anger. There could be silence. Sometimes kids or even your loved one might not even want to talk. Maybe they just want to watch movies with you. Maybe they just want to bed rock. It looks really different for a lot of people. Your presence is enough. Your presence is so powerful for someone that is going through grief.
One thing I don't know if we've mentioned is that we actually have questions at the back, and the questions at the back are really important because they can be construed as comprehension questions, but they also alert to the deep themes of the book. But the great thing about these is that there are questions for older children and questions for younger children. And you can kind of, if you're a parent, obviously, you can kind of decide what you want to go for or, read the room a little bit emotionally. But it also allows you to go deeper into the actual themes of this book beyond just what the surface value of the book is, which is a character that disappears. And so I think we're hoping it will really empower teachers as well to have these in their classrooms. If you've got a kid that's going through something, even if they're not, having these conversations are just so important to destigmatize them. But also it gives you some materials that you can use, because we all know teachers are under-resourced, as one that I formerly was. And it hopefully gives you a springboard to actually give you some useful things that you can use to create lessons that can hopefully help you as well, if that's where you end up going as a school and through your curriculum and stuff.
Yeah.
I just think they allow this book to also, I think we talked a lot about how it transcends stereotypical age groups, and that people, like, we've got grown men crying on one side, but we've also got families going through infant loss on the other, and we can actually bridge the gap between those ranges of ages just through using a book that's actually designed purposefully. A lot of them have said, when can I get it? Which is a good sign. But I think people are really keen to find something that bridges a gap for a conversation easily. And I think this gives you that chance. A lot of my friends have said we just need it in our classrooms, we need it in our school libraries. I think we've also talked a lot together about how getting into libraries, getting into places where it's really accessible is really important. Another conversation we've also had is around getting it into hospices as well, which I'm really passionate about, trying to get that happening more so as well than we already have. I've got a friend in a school that are potentially they're going to talk about grief. They're actually going to talk about grief, and they're talking it from a mental health point of view. And those sorts of conversations are exciting because they're starting to happen a lot more in schools, especially with the flexibility of the New Zealand curriculum. You have a lot of scope to do that kind of thing. The great thing is that you can use this book as an objective book study, or you can use it as a teaching guide. And so the teaching guide that I'm slowly developing is looking at the different facets of the book and how we can actually link that to mental health a bit more.
You're putting that master's degree to good use.
I'm trying to.
Yeah, I just can't wait for more conversations around grief and loss to be normalized so that, we can do this well. And that's how I'd want to raise my children. And what a gift to use pain for good, and turn that into purpose. And that's the only way I can get through life, when I go through hard times and suffering. Nothing is wasted.
I think so. And for all the teachers out there, it's such a hard job and such a valued job that you do. And I'm just hoping that this can be a real chance for you as well to, if you've got that kid in your classroom that's going through that thing, or you need to give them something to actually just sit with. This is something that you could actually just give a kid. They can follow along. And then if a conversation comes up, it will, but maybe you don't want it. Maybe that conversation doesn't happen. And so it gives you that ability to, in classroom settings as well, to just pick it up and to just sit with it. I really enjoyed / semi-hated at times the text. So the text of the book is custom, that I did myself, and it's actually modelled off my handwriting, which is very fun. But the text actually follows the ribbon through its journey with the characters. And so it was really challenging, I'm not going to lie. It took a lot of time formatting it 1 millimetre this way and 1 millimetre that way. But it gives kids a way to actually just follow the text with their finger that's a little bit more fun. And so I'm hoping that for those beautiful neurodivergent children that I taught in my career, that they can also have an ability to follow along with their finger in a way that's a little bit more whimsy.
You created, again, a custom font, and how special to be able to say that you've hand drawn the font. And I think another layer to it was really wanted to make sure the font felt like it was moving and it was part of the grief storm as well, which you did so well. So it's kind of like an addition to the illustrations. The font is a part of that storytelling.
Yeah.
One of the beautiful things about being independent and creating your own publishing company and doing a project like this where we haven't sold our rights away to to a huge publishing firm. We get to create these little gems and touches and layers to the book that would otherwise not be included, because it's not, linear and traditional. But I think we both love pushing the boundaries and doing something different. And that's exactly what we've done. And I'm so proud of the book.
We just want to make this book accessible to everybody. And I think honouring Te Reo Māori is something I'm really passionate about doing, and also making sure that something of the subject matter can also be available in the immersion space as well, is something I'm really keen to see more of. But we'll watch the space on that one. It's something slowly in the works.
This has taken over 2 years, right? 2-year journey plus.
Yeah. Honestly, anyone about to do a book, do not underestimate how long it will take.
We have a book, and we are now getting to share it with the world, and it's been such a joy. It's been such a privilege. This book is officially out now. You can get the book on Amazon now. There are a number of independent bookstores that will be listed below in the show notes. So you can go into the store and buy a copy of the book if you live in New Zealand, in Wellington, Christchurch or Auckland. It'll also be in our local library, Hutt City Library, where we both are from, which is really exciting. It's such a pinch me moment. If you are a teacher, a principal, an educator, and you're interested in getting a copy of this book, we are looking at doing a number of bulk orders internationally and then locally in New Zealand. So please get in touch. Again, all of the information will be in the show notes. Don't be afraid to get in contact and get yourself a copy. Yay, so exciting. Yay. If you are someone that is attached to a hospice, a charity, an NGO, and you are looking for a resource that addresses grief and loss, please get in touch with us. And I must mention as well, a portion of the proceeds will be going towards Victim Support, a charity that supported my friendship group and my friend's family who passed away, and they were absolutely incredible. So it's really important to us that we are able to support and provide this resource to as many people as possible. So please do get in touch. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for making this vision come to life. You've created a world for the story to live in, and it's just so beautiful. Thank you, Eleanor, for being a part of this journey, and we did it.
Yes, it's been my pleasure. It's been a fun ride. We've definitely learnt a lot.
We absolutely have, and it's just getting started.
All of us will face a moment that shakes us to our core. But what do we do with those feelings? As adults, we struggle to understand death. We dress it up, we avoid it, we search for the right words and often come up empty. If I am struggling, how much harder must it be for a child? Because grief isn't something we're really taught how to navigate, it's something we're expected to endure. Culturally, we don't talk about it enough. We don't sit with it, we don't make space for it. There are some cultures that do this really well, Māori culture in New Zealand. Besides that, there weren't too many examples that I could look to. There are so few resources that actually help us move through grief, especially for children. And yet, it's one of the only guarantees in life. At some point, all of us will experience loss. It might not necessarily look like death, but it could be the loss of a relationship, a friendship. It could be the loss of a dream, a missed opportunity. It could come in the form of disappointment. Grief and loss looks different for everyone, but the way we feel it is so important to recognise. If you're a teacher, school counsellor, principal, or part of a hospice or NGO, Where Is Pillar has been created as a practical, gentle resource to help children navigate grief. We're offering tailored bulk orders for schools and organisations who want to place this book directly into the hands of children who need it most. To inquire or partner with us, you can email wishuponawordbooks, that's WISHUPONAWORD books @gmail.com. You'll also find the details in the show notes. Thank you for listening to The News and You. Your support means the world. If you believe in the work we do at The News and You, sign up to our Patreon. It really is the best way to keep this going and be part of our Newsies community. I'd be so grateful if you can share the love by leaving a rating and review. It'll help spread these stories even further. What are your key takeaways? If the story impacted you or even made you see the world a little differently, why not share it with your friends and family? Until next time, remember, your story matters, and there's a shared truth behind everything.